not sure what happened there, but we got cut off halfway through the last chapter. So I'll read the end of this chapter and then we'll go straight on to the next one. So where were we? We were getting Wilbur into the crate, but nobody realised that the crate already contained a rat and a spider. "That's some pig," said Mrs. Arable. "He's terrific," said Lurvy. "He's very radiant," said Fern, remembering the day he was born. "Well," said Mrs. Zuckerman, "he's clean anyway. The buttermilk certainly helped." Mr. Arable studied Wilbur carefully. "Yeah, he's a wonderful pig," he said. "It's hard to believe that he was the runt of the litter. You'll get some good extra ham and bacon, Homer, when it comes to kill that pig." Wilbur heard these words and his heart almost stopped. I think I'm going to faint," he whispered to the old sheep who was watching. "Kneel down," whispered the old sheep. "Let the blood rush to your head." Wilbur sank to his knees, all radiance gone, his eyes closed. "Look," screamed Fern, "he's fading away." "Hey, watch me," yelled Avery, crawling on his fours into the crate. I'm a pig, I'm a pig." Avery's foot touched Templeton under the straw. "What a mess," thought the rat. "What fantastic creatures boys are. Why did I let myself in for this?" The geese saw Avery in the crate and cheered. "Avery, you get out of that crate this instant," commanded his mother. "What do you think you are?" "I'm a pig," cried Avery, tossing handfuls of straw into the air. "Oink, oink, 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 oink." "The truck is rolling away, Pa," said Fern. The truck, with no one at the wheel, had started to roll downhill. Mr. Arable dashed to the driver's seat and pulled on the emergency brake. The truck stopped. The geese cheered. Charlotte crouched and made herself as small as possible in the knot-hole so Avery wouldn't see her. "Come out at once," cried Mrs. Arable. Avery crawled out of the crate on hands and knees, making faces at Wilbur. Wilbur fainted away. "The pig's passed out," said Mrs. Zuckerman. "Throw water on him." "Throw buttermilk," suggested Avery. The geese cheered. Lurvy ran for a pail of water. Fern climbed into the pig pen and knelt by Wilbur. "It's sunstroke," said Zuckerman. "The heat's too much for him." "Maybe he's dead," said Avery. "Come out of that pig pen immediately," cried Mrs. Arable. Avery obeyed his mother and climbed into the back of the truck so that he could see better. Lurvy returned with the cold water and dashed it on Wilbur. "Throw some on me," cried Avery. "I'm hot too." "Oh, keep quiet," hollered Fern. "Keep quiet." Her eyes were brimming with tears. Wilbur, feeling the cold water, came to. He rose slowly to his feet while the geese cheered. "He's up," said Mr. Arable. "I guess there's nothing wrong with him." "I'm hungry," said Avery. "I want some candied apple." "Wilbur's all right now," said Fern. "We can start. I want to take a ride in the Ferris wheel." Mr. Zuckerman and Mr. Arable and Lurvy grabbed the pig and pushed him headfirst into the crate. Wilbur began to struggle. The harder the men pushed, the harder he held back. Avery jumped down and joined the men. Wilbur kicked and thrashed and grunted. "Nothing wrong with this pig," said Mr. Zuckerman cheerfully, pressing his knee hard against Wilbur's behind. "All together now, boys. Shove!" With a final heave, they jammed him into the crate. The geese cheered. Lurvy nailed some boards across the end so Wilbur couldn't back out. Then, using all their strength, the men picked up the crate, heaved it on board the truck. They did not know that under the straw was a rat and inside the keyhole was a spider. They saw only pig. "Everybody in?" called Mr. Arable. He started the motor. The ladies climbed in behind him. Mr. Zuckerman and Lurvy and Fern, Avery rode in the back. Hanging onto the sideboards, the truck began to move ahead. The geese cheered. The children answered their cheer, and away they went to the county fair. Chapter 17. Uncle. When they pulled into the fairgrounds, there they could hear music and see the Ferris wheel turning in the sky. They could smell the dust of the racetrack where the sprinkling cart had moistened it, and they could smell hamburgers frying and see balloons aloft. They could hear sheep bleating in their pens. An enormous voice over the loudspeaker said, "Attention, please! Will the owner of a Pontiac car, license plate H2439, please move your car away from the fireworks shed?" "Can I have some money?" asked Fern. "Can I too?" said Avery. "I'm going to win a doll by spinning a wheel and it will stop on the right number," said Fern. "I'm going to steer a jet plane and make it bump into another one." "Can I have a balloon?" asked Fern. "Can I have a frozen custard and cheeseburger and some raspberry soda pop?" said Avery. "You children be quiet till we get the pig unloaded," said Mrs. Arable. "Oh, let the children go off by themselves," suggested Mr. Arable. "The fairs only come once a year." Mr. Arable gave Fern 2 quarters and 2 dimes. He gave Avery 5 dimes and 4 nickels. "Now run along," he said. "And remember, the money has to last you all day. Don't spend it all in the first 5 minutes. And then be back here at the truck at noon so we can have lunch together. And don't eat a lot of stuff that's going to make you sick at the stomachs. And if you go to those swings," said Mrs. Arable, "you hang on tight. You hang on very tight, you hear me?" "And don't get lost," said Mrs. Zuckerman. "And don't get dirty." "And don't get overheated," said their mother. "Watch out for pickpockets," cautioned their father. "And don't cross the racetrack where the horses are coming," cried Mrs. Zuckerman. The children grabbed each other by the hand and danced off in the direction of the merry-go-round, towards the wonderful music and the wonderful adventure and the wonderful excitement, into the wonderful Midway, where there would be no parents to guard them and guide them, and where they could be happy and free to do as they pleased. Mrs. Arable stood quietly and watched them go. Then she sighed. Then she blew her nose. "Do you really think they'll be all right?" she asked. "Well, they've got to grow up sometime," said Mr. Arable, "and a fair is as good a place to start, I guess." While Wilbur was being unloaded and taken out of his crate and into his new pig pen, crowds gathered to watch. They stared at the sign, "Zuckerman's Famous Pig." Wilbur stared back and tried to look extra good. He was pleased with his new home. The pen was grassy and it was shaded from the sun by the shed roof. Charlotte watched her chance, scrambled out of the crate and climbed a post in the underside of the roof. Nobody noticed her. Templeton, not wishing to come out in broad daylight, stayed quietly under the straw at the bottom of the crate. Mr. Zuckerman poured some skimmed milk into Wilbur's trough, pitched clean straw into his pen, and then he and Mrs. Zuckerman and the Arables walked away towards the cattle barn to look at the purebred cows and to see the sights. Mr. Zuckerman particularly wanted to look at tractors. Mrs. Zuckerman wanted to see a deep freeze. Lurvy wandered off by himself, hoping to meet friends and have some fun on the Midway. As soon as the people were gone, Charlotte spoke to Wilbur. "It's a good thing you can't see what I can see," she said. "What do you see?" said Wilbur. "There's a pig in the next pen, and he's enormous." "I'm afraid he's much bigger than you are." "Maybe he's older than I am and has had more time to grow," suggested Wilbur. Tears began to prick at the back of his eyes. "I'll drop down and have a closer look," said Charlotte. Then she crawled along the beam. Till she was directly over the next pen. She let herself down on a drag line until she hung in the air just in front of the pig's snouts. "May I have your name?" she asked politely. The pig stared at her. "No name," he said in a big hearty voice.
Just call me Uncle.
Very well, Uncle, replied Charlotte. What is the date of your birth? Are you a spring pig?
Sure, I'm a spring pig, replied Uncle. What did you think I was, a spring chicken? That's a good one, eh, sister?
Mildly funny, said Charlotte. I've had funnier ones, though. Glad to have met you, and now I must be going. She ascended slowly and returned to Wilbur's pen. He claims he's a spring pig, reported Charlotte, and perhaps he is. One thing is certain, he has the most unattractive personality. He's too familiar, too noisy, and he cracks weak jokes. Also, he's not anywhere near as clean as you are, nor as pleasant. I took quite a dislike to him in our brief interview. He's going to be a hard pig to beat, though, Wilbur, on account of his size and weight. But with me helping you, it can be done. When are you going to spin a web? Said Wilbur. This afternoon, late. If I'm not too tired, said Charlotte. At least the least things tires me these days. I don't seem to have the energy I once had. My age, I guess. Wilbur looked at his friend. She looked rather swollen and seemed listless. I'm awfully sorry to hear that you're feeling poorly, Charlotte, he said. Perhaps if you spin a web and catch a couple of flies, you'll feel better. Perhaps, she said wearily, but I feel like the end of a long day, climbing up, down in the ceiling. She settled down for a nap, leaving Wilbur very much to worry alone. All morning people wandered past Wilbur's pen. Dozens and dozens of strangers stopped to stare at him and to admire his silky white coat, his curly tail, his kind and radiant expression. Then they would move to the next pen where the bigger pig lay. Wilbur heard several people make favourable remarks about Uncle's great size. He couldn't help overhearing these remarks, and he couldn't help worrying. And now, with Charlotte not feeling well, he thought, oh dear. All morning Templeton slept quietly under the straw. The day grew fiercely hot. At noon the Zuckermans and the Arables returned to the pig pen. Then, a few minutes later, Fern and Avery showed up. Fern had a monkey doll in her arms and was eating Cracker Jacks. Avery had a balloon tied to his ear and was chewing a candied apple. The children were hot and dirty. Isn't it hot? Said Mrs. Zuckerman. It's terribly hot, said Mrs. Arable, fanning herself with an advertisement for a deep freezer. One by one they climbed into the truck and opened lunch boxes. The sun beat down on everything. Nobody seemed hungry. When are the judges going to decide about Wilbur? Asked Mrs. Zuckerman. Not till tomorrow, said Mr. Zuckerman. Lurvy appeared carrying an Indian basket that he'd won. Oh, that's just what, an Indian blanket. Not basket, blanket. Oh, that's just what we need. A blanket. Of course it is, replied Lurvy, and he spread the blanket across the sideboards of the truck so that it was like a tent, and the children sat in the shade underneath the blanket and felt better. After lunch, they stretched and they fell asleep.